Thank you all for coming today, and welcome to this evening's discussion. For those of you who weren't here last time or just don't remember because it's been a month, my name is Scott Kaltenbaugh and I'm the facilitator this evening. I'm not a Marlboro resident and I'm not involved with Marlboro in any way, so I have no attachment to the end result of this. I just want what is best for you all in your community, and I'm here to help you get there. For those of you who were here at the last meeting, the structure of this meeting is going to be very different. We're not going to have the small groups that we did last time. The purpose is to shift things up and change a little bit and have some different types of discussions going on. We'll get to that structure a little bit later because the board would like to start by going over a lot of the questions and practical and financial discussions to provide you all with the baseline information that you need, so that then when we get to the discussion part of this evening, everybody will be closer to being on the same page. The board has also offered that once we shift out of this, then they will be available for individuals to come up and ask further, one-on-one questions as they need to, and we'll take a few questions at the end of this for a baseline, but in general, we'll have some time to do this, then we'll move into the discussion. All right?
Speaking of questions, I just have some paper and pencils. I'm just going to hand out little stacks of paper. You guys want to take some so that we can jot down your questions and we'll collect them. If you have questions throughout, I can continue to jot them down. We will continue to collect them as we move on through the evening. And then at the end of all of this, we will, you're welcome. We're going to collect all of the questions and write them all up for everyone. You need to write that out. Does anyone need to write it?
All right, as everybody is getting settled and writing some of their questions and getting things sorted out, just like to go through an exercise real quick. So I'd like to ask for a show of hands of the people that represent some of the different groups in this community. You can raise your hand multiple times because chances are you're going to represent multiple groups in here. So how many people in here are students, current students in the Marlboro school system? Okay, so we recognize that we're missing that group's voice here. That's right. How many are parents of current students? All right. How many are parents of former students? Excellent. How many are district school staff? All right. How many are former district school staff? How many of you are Marlboro taxpayers? All right. How many of you are Marlboro residents? Hopefully that number equaled out, otherwise maybe have a talk. Yeah, how many people attended Marlboro School District as a student yourself? All right, excellent. How many of you, and this comes to my mind because I have a brand new baby, how many of you have children who will be part of the Marlboro School District one day but aren't currently? Yay, okay. New parents, I'm excited. All right. So that gives us a sense of who is in the room with us today, all right, and also who is not in the room with us today. So bearing that in mind as we move forward and just understanding that these meetings are great and intended to encompass as many voices as can be heard, but we're not getting everybody. So we need to bear that in mind. All right, board members, are you all ready to go? All right, I turn over to you.
So we're just going to start with some introductions. And I think first, though, I would like to introduce to everybody here the new superintendent for the supervisory unit. Bill Anton, as you know, is setting off into the sunset at the end of this school year. And we're welcoming Bob Tebow. So Bob, stand up. Coming to us from Cleveland and Gray as the principal, moving into the superintendent role. And if you have any questions for him, this is a good time to grab him after the meeting. But I invited him, or we invited him to come because it's the perfect opportunity for him to meet Marlboro folks and also get a sense of what's going on in our school. So I hope everybody has this sheet, the top one with the big chunk of text. I think. Sure.
Just in case people don't know who I am, I'm Selena Romo, I'm the vice chair of the board.
Dan MacArthur on the school board.
And Douglas Gordon.
And we're missing Jeremy Kirk, who is also our board clerk. He'll be here a little bit later.
So I'll let Scott sort of guide us through the agenda, but essentially we're going to walk folks through this sheet in the beginning, which, if you remember, if you were here for the last meeting, that was more of a visioning and big box thinking about what's going on at the school, what's changed, what are the challenges. But what the board did was basically try to take the last 2 to 3 to 4 years of board meetings, sort of condense it down and distill it into this sheet. You know, it contains perennial challenges and things like that. But I think it's best to just start off and read the statement out loud so that everybody gets a sense. So when you leave tonight, you're going to be saturated with information and probably have a lot of questions. We're going to get to that in the second half of the evening, where we answer questions as well as take questions. We probably won't get to everybody's questions tonight, but we're going to gather them all, and we will have a resource on our website that people will see them answered. And then, of course, we'll have a third meeting, which will give more time, hopefully, for questions and things like that. So essentially, the first statement is, the intention of the first portion of this meeting is to share facts with the community about the set of challenges facing our school. These have been distilled through many years of board meetings and have been repeated through budget sessions. We are sharing these facts below in order to give the power to the community to choose what the future of our school might look like, and in turn, how this might impact the overall Marlboro community. The school board as a unit has strived to provide information in the documents we are sharing with you this evening in a manner that draws the complex picture of the situation rather than advocating for one specific choice. The school board as a whole does not have a position on what structure the Marlboro School should operate under. Not for next year, not for 5 years, or 25 years from now. Individual board members have expressed differing opinions on what should happen, with some still undecided. However, we all agree that the challenges that lie ahead are many and complex. It is with this understanding that the board wishes to share this information tonight and to ask direction from you at an upcoming special town meeting vote. And so I think that I'd like to share the bullets with the board members. So I'll just read off the first one. And some of these, if you could hold your questions, we're just going to get through and unpack them a little bit. If they need some more further explanation, we'll explain. But essentially, one of the driving forces of these meetings is that families have asked for more social and enrichment opportunities for their children in school.
That there are future renovation costs.
Currently, teacher shortages. I think everybody knows it's difficult to find teachers and to keep them if you can find them.
Teacher licenses for middle school grades, math, science, ELA, and social studies.
And I have an amendment to this one, which we just did numbers for, but we're currently the top 10% spending in school in Vermont. It's actually, we're number 6 in the state for equalized pupil spending, which is that box on the back that you see. And then we're number 1 for schools that are elementary with tuitioning for high school. And you might say, well, what does that mean? It just means that the state's clearly watching Marlboro overall for how much we're spending.
So current middle school model requires more teachers and classrooms than other grades. And it was also in response to a previous model that was unsustainable due to low student-teacher ratio. So, at what point would be helpful for Wayne to explain?
Wait, do you want to stand up and take?
Because I think that's very helpful.
Nellie, it's hard to hear you in the back.
So the bullet point that I'm reading says, so it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Current middle school model requires more teachers and classrooms than other grades. It was also a response to a previous model that was unsustainable due to low student-teacher ratio.
Yeah, so throughout Marlboro School, we actually have teachers in here that taught in middle school, Bruce. We had a model where there was 2 teachers in 7th and 8th grade. And those two teachers had 2 licenses. One had science and math, one had ELA and social studies. And when you compared that class to the other classes, it was twice as many staff. So 7th and 8th grade had 2 teachers. 5, 6, David, had 1 teacher, David. Through the process of the budgets becoming a little bit tighter throughout the years, we started to look at how we could distribute some of those resources to the other grades. And so that's evolved. It slowly went to a reduction in one of the junior high teachers, full-time status. It also included me teaching 6th grade math and also middle school math. And also, we had the math teacher in junior high for a year teaching 6th grade. And each of these evolutions was in response to being able to distribute the teaching staff. The last model that we have right now, which is a 5 through 8 model, it's pretty similar to what you would see at a middle school where students pass from grade to grade, from class to class, and they go to classrooms that teach a specific subject. So before it was all done in one classroom, and now students go to a math class, they go to a social studies and ELA class, and then they also go to a science class, which is why one of the reasons why we have a mobile classroom out there. The reason why we went to that was that it now distributed, or first we needed to save some financial, some money from the budget. And as you can see, even though we made this transition and we tried to save some money, we're still spending some money. So we went to this model. This model is also led by the teachers as well too. So this was teacher-led. It was driven by their passions. And at the time, the 5-6 teacher and 7-8 teacher had different passions. So we utilized those passions to create the model that we have now, which is a 5 through 8 model. Students pass from grade to grade. There's 2.5 teachers, because we have a science teacher this year. Like I said in the past, I would teach that. And that's how it evolved. So it has evolved through finances, and it's evolved through distribution of those resources. 2 teachers in one classroom as opposed to the rest of the classrooms having 1. And then the last piece was that this was also teacher-led, that we looked at the interest and passion and what teachers are really good at that level, and we balanced that around their passions as well too. So those threefold. So that's how we led to this new model. From the old model, 2 teachers in one classroom, to the new model, 2.5 teachers in different classrooms. Does that make sense? Okay.
So the next one, principal with skills at multi-levels, pre-K through 5 and 6 through 8. For those of you who don't know, Wayne is leaving at the end of this coming year. I think that's generally known and understood, but whatever the case, we will still need to find a principal who has the licensure to be a principal of a 6 through 8 school if we keep 7th and 8th here. So another something to keep in mind.
Declining enrollment for most rural areas, including Marlboro. The pandemic and the closing of Marlboro College have only exacerbated this reality for us.
Field research of the past is no longer financially sustainable, and new CDL federal regulations make it very difficult for teachers to obtain bus licenses to lead those field research trips.
Do you want to speak to that?
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Marlboro School in the past, my wife went here. She talks about her trips, Montreal, New York, buses breaking down. Bruce going to Monadnock on Saturday, just, okay, everybody get in the bus, let's get going. So it's been a long-standing tradition at Marlboro. It's valued, of course it's valued, it has a lot of meaning. To the Costa Rica trips that were led by my predecessor, Francie, and the 7th and 8th grade teachers, going to Costa Rica every other year. We went to Boston last year, and just to give you just a financial, comparison, our Boston trip last year for 3 days to Boston cost just as much as going to Costa Rica 3 years before for 7 days. And so it's become so expensive. And so, as you know, transportation has increased. The other part is that many of the teachers had bus licenses. And you could actually get a bus license pretty easily. Whether that was a good thing or not, you could get them. Regulations now to get a bus license is really challenging. So while we have buses that a teacher could potentially take when they would want, we don't have bus drivers anymore. So that does lead to extra costs. It does lead to some planning and so on and so forth. So those are the challenges that we're seeing. It doesn't mean that we're not still trying to do field research. Of course we are. It's just, unfortunately, a trip to Costa Rica is really difficult now, especially with how expensive it is. So that's what we're doing. Just want to say we have 2 trips planned for the spring. We're very excited.
And the last bullet point is on inflation and higher fixed costs, such as health insurance, that increases at 12% annually. That affects budget decisions. And unfortunately, the way that it's structured coming out of from a school budget, that everyone should have access to health insurance and use it, and yet it's coming out of this budget that we have to consider it at the expense of programming. So these are outside things that affect important educational decisions.
So then down below that is just simply a chart of enrollment. We just wanted to give you that. We can go back further years. We have all the data, so if you have questions about more years. But if you see that decline, I think one of the things to note is that, obviously the closure of Marlboro College is a big factor. But a lot of the students that came here with Marlboro College and their parents have graduated or are about to graduate. So you will see that number continue to shrink. And obviously, nobody really knows what's going on at Potash Hill. If you do, then you know a lot more than your board does. Yes, so that's just something we've always kept an eye on each year. And then if you turn over, we go to renovation expenses. So this is where we sort of depart from, okay, these are these outside forces that kind of pressurize us, right? So we're like in a pressure cooker here of inflation and rates that we can't control that are going like this. And then, you see the town of Marlboro and you see just nationally, wages, and they're not really matching that as well. So how you keep a sustainable financial program with that arc in the way that it's going. So that's just something we think about. So renovation expenses. Dan, you want to take the first one?
As I'm sure most of you know, this is the last substantial improvement we made to the school campus here, was this building, 1995, so it's almost 30 years ago now.
The current building needs are at a critical level and need to be addressed. I often comment on how the windows are the exact same windows they were when I went to school here in the 80s and 90s.
So we've been discussing capital improvements for years as a board, at least since I've been on. And then, we got hit with Act 46, and that delayed any changes to the school, major changes, that is. And then, of course, after that, COVID hit. We delayed changes there and did our patches, the best patches that we could on things. But it got to the point where this started to be a conversation at the board level where we basically said, we're going to have to go to the town for a bond. And if we're going to go to the town for a bond, the best way to ensure that that bond passes is to ensure that everybody is happy with the structure of the school. And so technically that is one of the number one reasons that we're doing this, is we need to decide that literally when we break ground, or whatever we break ground on for a school, you're going to be bonded to that decision, literally. So we want to make sure that whatever we're bonding into is affordable for the town.
So number 4, and all our financial decisions should stem from a shared vision for the school, the kind of education that we want to envision. Currently the repairs for this building are estimated between $3 to $5 million. that doesn't include additional spaces.
And for every dollar spent on renovation, we just found this out recently, and I guess I should point out that we have asked a consulting architect to give us numbers for what different building improvements would cost, whether it was for pre-K through 6 or pre-K through 8. They're supposed to be looking at saying, okay, minimum requirements in terms of square footage, for the numbers of kids you would have pre-K through 6, you would need to do this much work. If you had pre-K through 8, you would need to do this much work. As soon as we get those from the architect, we will make sure they're public information, because they're an important part of this, but I don't think anybody's deluding themselves to think that it was not going to cost more if we have more kids here and if we need to provide spaces for 7 and 8. But we also just found out that if you spend, the example they gave was if you spend $1 million on renovation, you have to spend a fifth as much, at least a fifth as much on accessibility. And we should anyway. Everyone who comes, every architect or engineer who comes in and sees the stairway that goes down the middle of the old school goes, my God, how are you even getting away with this? So, you know, it's not that we would be obliged to spend that money. We would feel it was crucial that we do that in order that the building become accessible.
Our current building does not have enough classrooms for the current middle school model. The board has added a mobile classroom that has an annual cost of $32,000 a year. Without the renovation or mobile classroom, the 7th and 8th grades would only work utilizing one classroom.
Okay, so then we have a chart, which is equalized pupil, and we debated on keeping this in or leaving it out, simply because we didn't want to get into the state funding formula. So to keep us from that, we just wanted to show you that from FY19, FY23, we've gone up with equalized pupil, but this is the number the state's looking at when they look at Marlboro spending, and currently the average in the state is 16,000, or sorry, 17,000, 16.9. So,
Bill, do you have like a quick definition for what equalized pupil is? Can you like?
What is an equalized pupil?
Yeah.
An equalized pupil is an actual pupil that is counted by the state to allow for a statewide funding system. So they count pupils differently. 0.46 is for a student in pre-K. 1 is for a student from kindergarten through 6th grade. 7th through 12th is 1.25. Yeah. Then you add those all together. You add the year prior and the current year, average those two, then that runs through a filter of additional influences such as English language learners or special education, poverty. That gets out into a number, and then that all gets weighted and equalized at the state level, sent back to the district and says, you may have 83 students in your building, you may have 37 students that are in 7 through 12 at outside the building. So you might think, oh, okay, it's very normal, we have 120 students. But their equalized pupils could be anywhere from 110 to 143, and that will change on an annual basis. So the equalized pupil is how you get your tax rate. It is not matched with students in the building or students that you're paying tuition for.
Here's one. Thank you.
please hold your questions.
Do you mind jotting down your questions? That's what the papers are for. So if you have questions.
I just wondered if FY23 is the fiscal year we're in right now, or the fiscal year that starts in 23? Okay, thank you.
No, we haven't finalized that number yet. We're doing the budget right now for next year. Okay.
Did everyone hear that question that Paul just asked? Okay, I just want to make sure everyone heard it. Paul was just asking if FY23 is for the current budget year or for next year. It's the current year that we are in now.
So helpful information. This is just simply information that we thought would be helpful for folks to review when you think about a 7th and 8th grade model. And I don't know if we need to go through them or if you can just read them, but You can add questions. I'm sure people have more questions about this PowerPoint maybe.
I think the second one, 7th, 8th grade, using more resources teachers to students would be helpful to expand on because you can hear me?
Oh, do you want me to?
Yeah, if you don't mind.
Yeah, so 7th.
So folks, I asked Wayne to maybe clarify the second bullet point under helpful information because I got asked this question at the last meeting, so I think it would be helpful for people to hear.
Yeah, because of the licenses, for teacher licenses, middle school students need a science license, an ELA, a social studies, and a math license. That you need to have those teachers. Right now, we just have more teachers for middle school, that middle school model. We have 2.5 teachers for 5 through 8, and which is 2 grades, and we have 1 teacher for every class after that. So there's just, right now, there's just more teachers in those grades than in the other grades. And that's one of the bigger expenses that you have.
And so the second sheet that we have, are we going to go to the second sheet?
Oh, can I just add to that? I'm sorry, I just missed one part. I think the other thing is that what Dan brought up was that they also use, for rightfully so, they just use more space in the building. So it's more classrooms, and that's just, if you use more classrooms, you're using more resources as well too. I just wanted to add that because, you know, everybody sees the mobile classroom out here, and that's part of it. So, sorry.
No, Wayne, stay up there. Because I think it's best, this sheet is simply a comparison of the cost and makeup of what a pre-K to 6 would be currently as the school exists and a pre-K to 8 as it exists now currently.
Yeah.
And there's just a few bullets that I think Wayne should probably be best to talk through.
Yeah. I want to say that when you look at the comparison between, I'll just start, pre-K to 6 to pre-K to 8, there's a lot of information behind this. This is really an estimate. This is not, even though I put it to the dollar, it is not to the dollar. It can sway tens, $10,000 to $20,000 either way. That could be if a teacher needs different health coverage. That could be if a teacher decides to get another job and we hired another teacher. There could be a very big difference there. There's a lot of factors associated with that number. So this really is my best attempt at being able to compare a pre-K to 6 and a pre-K to 8 school.
Do you mind opening up FTE?
Yes, and yes, thank you. So when you see 1.0 FTEs, FTEs stands for full time employment, and so 1 is your full time. You're here 5 days a week. You're here when we open, and you're here when we close. Now anything under that is less. So 0.2, 2/10 is 1 day. 0.3, 3/10 is 1.5 days, so on and so forth. So that's what that represents. So instead of saying 5 days, we say 1.0 FTEs. It also makes it really nice to put in spreadsheets. So that's where that piece is. And so what the board has asked me to read and discuss a little bit is the bottom section. And the sentence is, the difference between pre-K to 8 and pre-K to 6 structure is roughly around $400,000, as it states up here. And this money, this $400,000, could be used to be able to pay tuition for 22 7th and 8th graders at the current rate, which is $17,300.
I would like to qualify that number.
Yeah.
So I think it would be important to keep in mind that offering
800.
for 22 students does not address issues of equity for those for whom, for example, BEM doesn't work and they're facing other options that, for which the tuition is not fully covered by this transfer. So I think that would be useful information, that it would add additional financial burden onto those numbers.
I think what you're referring to is if you go to a private school.
Yeah.
And for some of the private schools, they're a little bit more than that. So you would have to either get a scholarship or you would pay for that extra amount. And if you went back to the previous sheet, you have the different tuition rates. I think it's a little over $19,000 for the grammar school and so on and so forth. So it would, the school, I mean, the parent would have to pay for that additional cost or receive a scholarship. This money could be used to reduce the tax rate. So we have very similar programming for both of these programs. And some of that money, if we don't have 22 students, like this year we have 12, that would mean that there's 10 students that we wouldn't have to pay tuition for. So that money could be used to lower the budget, and which would therefore lower the tax rate. However,
Ask under
yes.
specials for pre-K through 6, why is the pre-K through 2 music cost X?
because if you look at the 0.3 FTE for the 3 through 8 music, I should have probably put that as pre-K to 6.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Good catch. Good
In
question.
science,
Science would go back to the classroom teachers, as it was previous. And then the last piece is we could also provide more programming. So we could, if we didn't have 22 students tuitioning to other schools, if we had, like, again, 12, or on average, we have about 17 students in junior high, we could actually use those funds to keep the same tax rate, and we could use those resources to in the school. And you could use it for additional staffing, you could use it for additional programming, you could use it to even help pay for the renovation and those costs. Yeah.
Wait, I'm not taking questions.
Oh, yeah.
Well, can I just-
We're actually going to turn it over to
This is
Scott.
seeming a very biased presentation so far, and I just want to put that out there, that I haven't heard anything about the benefits between 7th and 8th yet. So I think it's great to explain the budgets and your calculations, but I'm sure we can make changes to some of this if the town valued pre-K to 8 and wanted to keep that model. So this isn't written in stone, I'm just saying. So I appreciate the information, but it just seems very one-sided so far.
And that is part of what we'll get into in the discussion part later, is other options and how we can explore that. And I think right now they're just, providing the basic numbers for everybody so we're all on that same page. But yeah,
Providing one possibility of numbers.
the current, the way it's currently laid out.
Right, I mean, we are providing simply just what we face every budget cycle and what we have to decide to do. So, this is an unchanged budget right now. So we're still at pre-K to 8, and we're just saying that every year we come to these, and if we're going to come to the town, say that we're going to build a $5 million school, that's going to bring that cost up greatly. So everybody just needs to be aware of that before we engage with architects and before we do all that work and spend money too. So.
At the same time, I would like to acknowledge that it is important to consider the value of education that's not necessarily visible from numbers, like the benefits of having older students working with younger students and how they are better afterwards. So I think this is important.
But we're trying to remain as unbiased as possible.
But there are other models that would reduce the budget if we kept 7th, 8th grade too.
So, yeah, and
I'm just bringing
I'm
that up.
happy to, I think we're going to be exploring those, and we're going to be looking at those. This is what we have now today. And what the last thing I'd want to say is that our pre-K to 8 staffing right now is a moving target. Like Doug just said, every single budget season, we receive the numbers from the state, which essentially tell us how much we can spend. Right now, this is a budget that was based off of 100 students of last year, and now we have 83 students. We have 83 students coming next year. Last year, the money from the state was cushioned. There was significantly I think it was 40 million was the bill. $45 million put into the ed fund to reduce the tax rate. We're not going to see that this year too. So this pre-K to 8 model that we have here is the best we can do today with the information that we have. And about a month from now, we'll have much better numbers about a pre-K to 8 program based upon how many kids we have and what state money is. Just want to point that out too. So this is what we have today, not a month. Okay?
Scott?
Board, you all feel good?
I think we're good.
So let's just take, given our time, 2 just clarifying questions about what this is, not starting to address ideas of other options and things like that. We will get to that in the discussion. We'll ask 2 general clarifying questions, and then, as I said before, the board will be available if you have a specific question to like go up and ask them as we're doing this next thing. So we'll do 1, then 2.
Just on the issue of tuitioning and per pupil costs, I know we currently have 12 students in the 7th and 8th, but it'd be really helpful for me to know how many 7th and 8th graders we have currently in Marlboro, because I know there's a significant population already going to other schools who obviously would qualify for tuition if we moved to that model. So that would just help me. About 5 more.
Wayne would know the actual number of students.
How many 7th and 8th graders are currently living in Marlboro and going to other middle schools?
Yes, so the answer is how many students are tuitioning to other middle schools?
Well, or not
Yeah.
tuitioning, but
Or just
Going, yeah.
choosing to go to,
Who
and that's
would be
currently
paying
5
tuition.
already.
Right.
That's 5.
5.
Yeah.
So it'd be 17 in the actual total population.
Yep. Yep. And that's about our average,
Yeah.
like I was saying.
And our last one back there.
So pre-COVID, there was this whole thing on NPR about the equalized pupil formula being bad and wrong for rural schools. Did they fix it, or are we just still going off these faulty numbers? Because that's like, yeah.
So yes, they did. We're very excited, but they did listen. They did change it, but it's a phase-in. So we're really not going to see the impacts, especially when that $47 million that Wayne talks about goes away. It's going to be phased in year over year, and it basically weights students differently. So before it was like pre-K 0.75, elementary 1, high school 1.25. It breaks all that up into, take into factors of morality, so 36, I forget the actual term, but basically the distance between kids and their school and morality is one factor which will weight our students higher, I believe, and then give us, they'll return more dollars on that equalized pupil, take off equalized pupils money so that we're spending less, which is good. But it impacts larger districts more like up north that have larger ELL populations. So, but yes, that did go through.
Okay. Because we need to move on to the next phase, I understand.
Actually, a piece of information people should know before we head into discussion. If people are not familiar with the bill that passed the Vermont Senate last year and hasn't yet passed through the House, it's Bill S-219, and it specifically deals with tuitioning from public money into private schools. And if that bill, there's issues with it, and you can talk to the senators, but if that bill were to continue, and there are a lot of positives about it, but there are also some negatives, any school that has an admissions process and doesn't accept every single student who applies there would not be eligible for sending town tuition. So on this list, the only school that would be eligible would be Compass School. Every other school, as far as I understand it, currently has what they call
Private schools.
what?
You mean out of the private?
Out of the private schools, yeah. So Compass would be the only choice if that bill goes through.
I'd actually like to just ask Bill if he has any information on that from the legislature. And did Ani get that right in terms of the acceptance? Because they have to meet the standards of the state, right? They don't have to just accept all students.
That's an apt description of the bill that passed the Senate, but I would just say that there's a process, right? You have Senate, House, then you have the legal realities of constitutionality, and then you have the Supreme Court decision that happened in Maine versus, I forget the name, Dickinson or something like that. That I would expect over the next biennium in Vermont, that is going to play itself out. I have no idea what the outcome will be, but it will be very vocal and it will be very participatory. And your board will be well informed of that process as it goes through. But yeah, that was a very apt description of 219 and where it stands right now.
And I think it's worth pointing out that we are also tuition-paying town grades 9 through 12 and have been for years. That's going to affect those kids a lot more than it's going to affect 7th and 8th. It's going to affect people who currently go to Herman or Putney School or whatever. So, yeah, we'll keep an eye on it.
And I think that it was the religious school change which kick-started it all. So this isn't just something that Vermont picked up on its own. This is a reaction to that. So, Scott, great. Another question.
All right. So what I'm going to have us do now, we're getting a little pressed for time, but can we move the chairs into a big circle? All right. Take 5 minutes. You all got this. I have faith in you. Sure. You know, oh boy. Squashing, oh boy. We're going to leave some of these in the center. Yeah. All right. Yeah, thanks. All right. You all did that wonderfully. That was super fast. It was great. You all are rock stars. Okay, so there are a lot of voices in this room. And those voices deserve to be heard. They offer valuable insight. It's important, all right? Given the restraints, the constraints of time and structure, not everybody's voice is going to get heard today, okay? But I want to throw an interesting meeting structure at you. This is something I like. It's called a fishbowl, all right? So what's going to happen is we're going to have 10 people plus me here in the middle for a very concentrated, short discussion on one of these topics, all right? It will be facilitated by me, but it will be you all discussing it, all right? Everybody else will act as observers. You will all get a chance, if you want, to jump in and be part of the discussion. That's what your playing cards are for. Your playing cards are a ticket, right, to get in. So you are limited to 2 discussions because so many voices, all right? Now, I know this feels a little challenging, but we have 4 topics. I think we will probably only have time to get to the top 3. I think our wild card one may have to wait. So, topic 1, student and family needs. Topic 2, practical and financial considerations. And topic 3, equity, challenges, and risks of these different paths. All right? So, think about which of those discussions, if you want to speak, you would most want to be a part of.
Can you restate the 3?
Yeah, the 3 are student and family needs, practical and financial situations and challenges, and equity, challenges, and risks of these different paths.
What's the difference between student family needs and equity?
I broke it up because student family needs, yes, they obviously overlap. Student family needs, like, let's get to the core of like what individual students need and what the families need to consider and how these different paths might address that or fail to address that in each of those. And then in the equity discussion, getting into how families might have to deal with those differently based on their situations and circumstances. Is that helpful? Great. Okay, so I gave you all 2 2 playing cards to give you 2 chances to get in. Given our time, I think I'm going to ask you to only use 1. All right? So think carefully about which one you want to use. We'll have about 12 minutes for each topic discussion, broken up into 2 groups. All right? So there will be a group that comes up and talks for 6 minutes, and then another group that comes up and talks for 6 minutes, and then we'll move on to the next topic.
Clarifying question.
Yeah.
I see the categories.
Yeah.
What's the question or topic?
I will give you specific questions to discuss.
So, but are we talking about the 7th, the junior high?
It is all based on these different path potentials for the 7th and 8th grade for the junior high.
Okay, that wasn't clear.
Sorry, yeah, that's what we're working on. Okay, other questions about the structure of how this is going to work? Great. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 plus my chair. So, if you would like to come up for the student and family needs discussion, can I get 10 people come up, bring your card? All right. All right. Brave souls, I love it.
5.
I can toss it in. Can I get one of the board members up here as well to be part of this group then? Does one of the board members want to jump into this discussion as well? Okay. So, great. All right. So what I'm going to ask us to do is, those of us, please speak loudly. I'm going to ask that you share your name first before you speak, because I don't know everybody here, and not everybody else may know, though I know this is a tighter community than some. So that's great. And those of you on the outside, be actively listening. Be thinking about what you want to contribute and what's coming up for you. I would welcome quiet conversations with the person next to you, if that feels helpful to you. But let's keep the overall thing to be observers from the outside. All right? And then just a few reminders of some of our norms from last time. We're listening to understand, not to debate, right? We're listening to really understand what the other person has to say. We're speaking from our own experience. I want to emphasize the goal here is this is you all, the community, versus the challenge. This isn't pro 7th, 8th and anti 7th, 8th, right? Or like pro taxes, or like, this isn't 2 groups versus each other. This is us against the challenge. If we keep that mindset, hopefully that will keep us working together. And then finally, look, to emphasize this again, this group here, this meeting, is not reaching an agreement. This group is not intended to make a decision tonight or even at the next meeting. What we're creating here tonight is a shared pool of understanding. We want to understand where everybody in the community is coming from. That's what we're after tonight, not reaching an agreement. We're not trying to sell other people on our point of view. We're putting our understanding into the pool. Great? All right. So, your opening question for this group is, what are some of the key student and family needs for the students in this district?
Community is one of them.
Yeah.
The kids have these friends and they know their neighbors and everyone in the school knows your name. Kind of like Cheers, but for kids.
Having that tight sense of community, excellent.
Yeah. So that's a need, I think, for kids to have a feeling of belonging.
Yeah.
Sorry, I think it's a need for kids to have a feeling of belonging, and I think community, a sense of people knowing who you are, not being lost in a crowd, a place where you can go that you feel comfortable in. Not everyone has a safe home environment, and so for some, school is their safe home environment. And so having that be a place where you can, come and not feel like you're just another face in the crowd that's going to get forgotten is important.
And I will help repeat the key points of everybody's because I have a nice loud voice and don't mind shouting at you all. Right. Other needs for students and members of for students in this community. What are you saying? Just go for it.
I think just on a very basic practical need is accessibility to school, being able to get to school, and also having a school that's able to provide enrichment and childcare that works with families' schedules.
Yeah. So accessibility to school and education, both transportation-wise, but also just physical accessibility. But then also, can you clarify the second part for me as well?
Well, just that, the needs of working families that are juggling, getting their kids to school, and also, having after-school programs that can allow families to. Yeah,
providing those enrichment and after-school that allow families to like meet their financial needs by working and also have their children taken care of. Yeah.
I think at a basic level, students need to feel supported in the community that they're in. And on the other side of that coin, especially with the older students, need to start learning how to support the community that they are in.
Students feeling supported in the community and older students learning to support the community in return and exchange. So with those ideas in mind, what are some of the ways in which these different potential paths for the school district, keeping the 7th and 8th in the future, getting rid of the 7th and 8th and moving to different models, changing some of the different structures, with these different paths, what are some of the ways that those paths can serve the needs of these students?
Can I just add something? I just thought we were going to get there. We didn't get there yet, but we didn't get to the academic needs. I mean, we need an enriching and engaging curriculum that also supports the individual and grows good citizens. But that's like a key piece that we just haven't gotten to.
Yeah,
so I didn't want us to move on to the next thing before we got to
and enriching and engaging academic curriculum. Excellent.
Yeah, I sort of almost take that as a given. Every school should be doing that, okay. But what I think Marlboro, and I've been involved, Adrienne, I've been involved with the school for 40 years now, what has always been incredibly important is a really enriched environment for not only for learning, but also socially as well in every way. And that's why the thing that I see in common that everyone has mentioned so far is having a diverse, as large an age, a set of students of different ages actually interacting with each other, not shut away in separate classes or in separate schools, in separate classrooms or in separate schools, but actually being together. And I've seen that that is the thing that has made Marlboro Elementary really special for so many years. It's one of the reasons why, obviously, I'm in favor of keeping 7th and 8th if possible.
Yeah. So understanding that one of the important needs that you see is the interaction between students of different ages, and that a path forward that involves keeping the 7th and 8th grades would facilitate that and make that much easier to do and a much greater possibility.
And the learning that occurs, the social learning that occurs with the fundamental societal learning that occurs as a result of that.
Yes.
I was going to say that middle school is such a time when kids are figuring themselves out, and I think something that's so key to kind of making or breaking that situation is for kids to feel seen by each other and by their teachers. And I think that's something that's really special about this school, is that in part because of the small size, kids can feel really seen and they can have really strong relationships with their teachers, whereas in a larger school environment, sometimes kids fall through the cracks, and teachers they have so many students that it's just really hard to form those bonds.
So there's a desire for that small school environment that creates closer individual small group relationships between teachers and students and each other, everybody being fully seen for who they are. And the concern is that if students have to go to larger schools, that they will be lost in that larger crowd and lose out on that benefit. Is that? And I just haven't heard your voice as much, so do you have anything you want to contribute?
Well, I was, Jamie had mentioned the basic thing. I think that, intellectual and social emotional formation are things that we are able to expect now from these amazing teachers and this community. Yeah, I mean, as far as the different models go, I'm someone who sees the strengths of different models, but I think that the 7th and 8th grade needs, my own just speaking just as a parent at a school, but 7th and 8th grade needs to be supported and funded to a degree that it isn't now. And so if we want to do that, then we need to actually do it. And we need to actually support it in a way that it's currently not funded. So in order to achieve the things that we just said that we value.
Yeah. So particularly supporting the social and emotional well-being of the students, keeping the 7th and 8th grade around, because that feels for you like the best path forward.
No, it's not the best path. It's that if that is the path that we are going to take, then it's one that can only be done through actually supporting it financially, which is not, we don't have enough resources right now. Great.
Like, to answer the second question, I could completely see the potential for everyone gets to go to their school choice school, and oh, if you're into the arts, you get to the artsy school, if you're into the science, you get to the sciencey school. Academically, maybe that's better, I don't know. My kids used to go to a private school. My 2 boys went to Hilltop all the way through 8th grade. We left Hilltop because I wanted a different feeling. I wanted more of a community. I wanted more diversity. Vermont is, people like to say about how Vermont is not diverse. I think Vermont is very diverse in socioeconomic ways. And, even the scholarship kids at Hilltop are pretty well off. And so they're just not really they're not really meeting a wide variety of people. And there's so much about a community that's great. So, if you look at, the choice situation, maybe they'll get some better extracurriculars, which I didn't really find any of my passions until I was in high school and college. So, yeah, they could maybe start something really early and maybe they'll be the next, Olympic swimmer. But, at Marlboro School, they're getting this foundational community at, like you were saying, at a really critical time. To be seen. I mean, I went to a big middle school and I was invisible except that I was the smart kid. So, if not for that, I knew a lot of people that just kind of, and they had real problems and nobody was asking them why they were dressing shabby, why their clothes were dirty. So I think that that's something that is a really important kind of non-tangible. When you're looking at numbers, it's really easy to look at the numbers and do the math and say, oh, well, it's going to cost me, $1,300 more to go to this school. Because numbers are so concrete and reliable and safe. But when you start thinking about socio-emotional stuff, you can't really quantify that. And so I think that that's the difficult thing, is because you can go to the taxpayers and say, this is going to save us this much money, but you can't quantify what it's going to cost us in an emotional sense.
Can I just add to that?
This does need to be the last point, and then we need to switch out groups. So,
concentrating on the money. I mean, probably the cheapest thing for Marlboro to do in terms of paying the least for its education is to shut the school and send kids everywhere else. I mean, that's the logical consequence of this kind of thinking. Now I'm caricaturing it to make a point. But the point is that this is not, we do need to consider, what our desires for our community as expressed inside the school is. And, the inclusion of 7th and 8th grade or not is a big part of that.
all right. I'm going to give one sentence to you and one sentence to you because you both seem very eager. So very quickly, and then we'll switch groups.
Good. I just want to use this moment to say that collectively we have been through an incredible trauma with COVID. COVID was only mentioned tonight in the sense of money, and I think that our students in particular, I worry about them. They need support coming out of it, but I also want to take the moment to thank publicly the teachers and the staff and everyone. That's all.
So as quick as I can, I wanted to share that, I want to share an insider perspective a little bit. I'm a teacher, I work in Guilford, and I live here, and I work with upper grades. So I would say weekly, we would meet with the 6th grade team, and 9 out of 10 meetings, we have conversations about how great the level of concern is sending these 6th graders to bands. And that's not to, crush bands down and say they're doing a terrible job, they're facing a lot of challenges, but almost every single time there's a conversation with real concern, teachers and parents saying, what are we going to do sending these kids to school, 504 plans, IEP plans that are simply not being met. which is illegal, but it's a real concern, so I wanted to share that.
Nice.
All right, thank you to this group. If there are more people who want to come in, this is your last chance to talk about student and family needs. Yes, go for it. Okay, it sounds, all right, yes. Ace of Hearts. Okay. Yeah. Okay, my impression, my feeling is that people feel like we are at a good point with the discussion on student and family needs. All right?
I have a question.
Yes.
I just want to ask if the 6th, 7th, and 8th graders are part of the conversation and how they feel about staying tuition out.
This is something that came up at the end of last meeting, and there was an encouragement and an ask to bring in students. Unfortunately, we didn't get any tonight, so for our final meeting, I would make that big push to bring students in. Let's hear their voices. So, yeah.
I just think you can't just rely on these current 7th and 8th students. We have kids coming up from kindergarten. We have kids who haven't even been born yet who will be coming through the school.
So, all right. Is it real? Yeah.
It's kind of a little bit of a comment, but I was just listening. I was wondering about if anybody has thought about how the needs of students in a very rural community might differ from those of students in Brattleboro, say. Just coming from a larger community where there's a lot more opportunity, a lot more going on around them, how to keep them connected. And I just felt, I felt like that need to, for our kids to be seen might be a little bit more heightened when we all live so far away from each other.
Yeah. So I'm going to put that out there as a great, we're not responding to that now, but asking you all as you consider your stance on all of this to think about how the needs of your students might be different from the needs of students in other areas that we might be like making more assumptions about, like, oh, it's not all just like students in Brattleboro, it's not all just like students in Boston, right? Like the specific situation for your students in your community. So with that in mind, we are getting very close on time. So I'm going to have one group, and we can have more than we just had up, to talk about the practical and financial concerns and sides of things. So come on up if that is something you want to make sure you talk about.
Could I just ask a question that group could maybe address? I don't feel like I need to be in the group, but just looking at the numbers we have, it looks like one science teacher and one diming consultant costs $400,000, and I'm just perplexed by that.
Yeah, that's a question for the board, and so the board is available if you have, like, want to have some specific. So once you have that answer, we can share and clarify. So my question for you all in this group is, what are your biggest concerns about the financial challenges facing the district moving forward? And remember, say your name and a sense of who you are.
Paul Butler, I'm a local resident, I'm a taxpayer. I feel that our community has an obligation to educate our kids, which is something we've been doing for 250 years, and we're educating them much better in modern times than we used to. I think that things have been said about the school funding formulas, but I think that statewide, for 25 years, the funding formulas have been very beneficial for outcomes. My main concern is that whatever model we propose has to be sustainable, and how are we going to be able to assert that we're proposing a sustainable model? And I have a secondary issue in that I have not yet heard any discussion of our tax base, which is primarily our property tax base, and what level of spending it could support. And I know that people have brought up issues of the funding formula, but I don't think we can go borrow 4 or 5 million in the bond market and say, well, we're waiting for the funding formula to change. I think for many years there have been changes to the funding formula. We have to have a sustainable model in terms of revenue and expenses that'll allow for paying off a bond issue and paying it off with what we have in hand, or what we can, our concrete sources of revenue. So that's my major concern.
So there's a concern with however we're moving forward, having a very specific plan in place for how to pay the bond and how to pay off whatever expenses are incurred, right? And not just relying on, oh, we hope that the formula changes in the future, or we think that maybe things will be different from now. Given the reality of the current situation, how are we going to adjust in the future? Is that the correct
That's
summary?
correct. And if we didn't have a sustainable model, the future, as someone alluded to earlier, is like the town of Stratton. Stratton has good outcomes for kids, but they have no school district whatsoever. They have no schools. They tuition out all their kids. I have friends who live there because they wanted that, and it's been good for them. But, there is no community school. So if we're avoiding Stratton, I don't want to say anything bad about them. People love it.
Yeah, just understanding that Stratton has a different
And,
model, and that's a choice.
Right,
Cool.
right. We want to, I think the sense of the group is that that's not what we want to end up with.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
I just keep thinking that there's, all this discussion, there's been a lot of needs that the building has that have been put off for, it's been pointed out how many years they've been put off. And I just keep thinking that we also don't have to address all of these needs all at once. We can do them, take the most important, the most dire, the thing that needs to be done first, and bond for that, do that, spread them out over a number of years. You don't have to put all this money all at once and go into hot for all of the needs that the building would need.
So expressing the possibility that maybe rather than trying to meet all of the renovation needs and all of the building needs that, right now in one chunk, whether an option is to expand, to do that over time, and whether that might make things more financially feasible in different ways. So, great. Other thoughts and concerns?
I guess my main concern is just that we make a decision based on our overall goals and not temporary financials, because as we know with COVID, things could change, and it worked out well for us, for instance, to be a small school. Students were able to stay in the classroom a lot more than at bands, and probably had much better outcomes, socially, emotionally, and academically. We don't know what the future holds. This is always changing. So and also other schools have made, Brattleboro and Halifax, with their consolidation, they decided to divorce and go back their separate ways. So I want us to be really careful to not make a permanent decision based on something that's temporary that we then would regret later.
I'm going to use that final sentence as the summary for everybody. Being cautious about making a long-term or more permanent decision that's based on current circumstances that are maybe unusual or temporary, and understanding and thinking about how we're making those long-term decisions.
I guess one big question thinking about the school renovation is just if somebody could possibly briefly speak to the fact that we have a rather large collection of educational buildings a couple miles that way that went for a lot less than $3 million for 10 months of the year. And just if someone could clarify why that's not an option, I think.
I'm happy to address that. The question was, why aren't we looking at the Marlboro College campus, Potash Hill? We've been deeply involved with that, but they can't offer us anything at this point because they don't know what's happening. As soon as they know what we're interested in, they know what we would be willing to, give up here and move there for, but they can't promise us that, and so we're sort of stuck in limbo at this point. However, that is maybe another reason to not make important decisions too fast. And if I can bring up two other things about the finances. One of them is that the state currently does not assess a penalty to school districts who spend above a certain amount of money. They have put that, there's a hold harmless on that until I think 2029, but that will come back to haunt us. And we do spend more than that, and if they then reassess that penalty, our tax rates will go up, sort of relative to your question about the local tax base. However, the state of Vermont also, 83% of the resident taxpayers in Marlboro who own homesteads receive money back on their local education property taxes. About 205 of the 300, so I have the figures over here exactly, we get collectively back from the state, coincidentally, about $394,000 a year in support for our local education taxes on our homesteads. So that's an important thing to keep in mind, is that the people whose incomes are the lowest get the biggest benefit from the way the state of Vermont assesses property taxes.
Did everyone hear that enough that I don't have to? Yeah, because that was loud. Great. Okay, final question for this group before we move on to the last group. What would be maybe a minimum operating level for this district in terms of number of students or things like that? Like, at what point does it just no longer make sense under any circumstances to keep the 7th grade? And maybe the answer is one student. Maybe it's like, as long as we have one student, we keep it. Like, that can be your answer.
Well,
What do you see as a minimum?
I was thinking about this just because I was looking at these numbers, and we just had a person pass away in town who is very dear to everyone in town, David Elliott. And in his interview, which the junior high kids conducted, or David's class conducted, of people in town, I was listening to that the other day, and he said, when he was in school, the question from Rhodes was, how many kids were in school when you were in school? And he said, oh, I think there were, I don't know, maybe 60, 65, and it was the same configuration. Well, there wasn't the pre-K, but it was K through 8.
There was no kindergarten then.
I mean, I think you have to reconfigure it, obviously,
He was in my
but,
class.
I mean, it's just, and it kind of gets to the point of like, at what point do we want one at a school at all, right? Like, at a certain point, if numbers are low, then it's just wouldn't have a school, or do we value having a school or not? You know, it's back to that.
So thinking about how we reconfigure the school at different levels and different numbers of students.
I mean, I would say as a practical number, I think once you start having to combine grades more than 3 grades to make up a classroom, you're probably pushing what you can reasonably expect any one teacher to smear on educating first, second, and third graders, fourth, fifth, sixth, whatever. But I'll also point out a lot of what's running this school is not classroom teachers. I mean, we're talking about the 7th, 8th takes more teachers, and it's got 1.5 teachers per the 2 grades right now instead of 1. But in this model, there's also 3.5 FTEs that are assumed to go with it between bits of specials, another whole paraprofessional, even though we currently only have 12 students in there, 2 days a week of a counselor, a food and custodial assistant, almost full-time, and that's not even counting special ed. So it's just a lot of what's making a school run is not classroom teachers. It's not the majority of it.
So understanding, like, the first answer was just, once we start to combining 3 grade levels into 1 classroom, that's when it starts to become challenging, but also understanding that it's not a number of students for a given classroom teacher. There are a lot of other teachers who are supporting a grade, and that factor needs to be considered. All right, this will be our last thought, and then we'll switch to the last group.
I think it's really important to keep in mind that people look at the town or come to the town or buy real estate in the town or choose to live here or choose to live here full time in the pandemic because they had a second home here. That's because, or the thing that families look at is schools and how schools are rated or factors that are out there on Zillow or some other website about schools. And yes, there are things that cause enrollments to decline, but there's a floor, and especially if our schools make our town attractive, you keep having new families moving in. So, I mean, we have succeeded with that, I think, in the past. I think we should, plan on success by, having a school district that looks attractive to prospective outsiders who want to come live here, or people who grew up here and might actually, come back and live here.
So thinking about the future residents and making a school in a district that is attractive and will actively bring in new families with children, even if current numbers might be lower, thinking that like by creating this best school that we can, we create a desire for more, which will bring in more students. All right, thank you all to this group. And then I will invite the last group to come in to talk about equity, challenges, and risks for these different paths. Equity, challenges, and risks. We'll make this one go fairly fast because we're coming up on our time, and I know that you all have children that you want to get home to, families that you want to get home to, and food that is not pizza. Other folks who want to come? All right, excellent. Yes, yes. All right.
Come on, somebody else. No one wants voices. Thank you.
See, we want to make it more staff.
All right.
More spots.
Great. Wonderful. I will say, since we're lower numbers, if you want to come up again, you can come up again. Yeah.
I just want to, as a school board, we get a lot of comments about equity. So if you feel like you want to say something, it'd be great to come say it here.
Yeah. All right, wonderful. So on the topic of equity, how do these different potential paths moving forward affect student and family equity in this community? All right. And I will ask again, please just say your name, and if you have a role that is relevant that you want to mention, like you can say that.
Scott, clarifying question.
Yeah.
How do you define it?
For me, as a facilitator, I define equity as finding the best way to meet the different needs of different families and make sure that everyone is getting to kind of a same basic starting point. It's not equality of giving the same things to everybody, but like people who need more might get more resources from the community, people who need less might get fewer resources from the community, but the idea being that to get to everybody to being at that same basic level. That's what I mean when I'm asking about equity.
And sorry, another clarifying question.
Yeah.
Are we only talking about family equity, or are we also talking about equity for staff, like with regard to employment levels?
I think, yeah, let's go ahead and bring it. The original question was about students and families, but I think the staff question is absolutely relevant. So yeah, you can go ahead and bring it.
Now I don't remember the question.
That's all right. What are the different factors, in what ways will these different potential paths affect student, family, and staff equity?
My name is William. I have 2 second graders in the school. I think for me, one of the ways in which this whole conversation is so thorny is that it feels like some options might meet some families' needs dramatically more than other options, and all the different needs feel so compelling. That's just to start things off. And that's why we all feel so much.
Yeah.
There's special education needs, there's social needs, there's all kinds of different needs, and they might be meant differently, but there's different options.
Yeah, so these different paths will meet different families and students' needs differently. And everybody has deep feelings about, like, especially what's going to affect them and the issues and the people that they care about. Is that good?
I'm happy to go next. I'm Wayne, and I'd like to be a parent for this round. So I'm no longer the principal.
just piggybacking on what William said, there's times where I think about when kids go off to college. There's students that choose small liberal arts schools, and there's students that pick universities. And we have the same population of students here in 7th and 8th grade. It really comes down to each student. I have three kids here, and I would say that I see one of my children really benefiting from a small school, and I see another student already seeing that they would benefit from a much larger school. And so, for me, equity, as much as we're trying to make a decision for all children, it really comes down to each individual child as well, too. And that's the challenge that I see with this, is that there are students that could benefit from a larger population of students to socialize with, or to play organized sports, or to have 4 seasons of sports after school. I also used to be a 7th grade middle school teacher, where 6 elementary schools fed in to the 7th grade. And then it was a 7th through 12 school, and I saw a lot of kids that maybe didn't have a friend in their 6th grade class of 13, now have a bunch of friends. Or I saw kids that had long-standing friends since kindergarten that kept them. Or I saw other students that had really big conflicts all the time in their 6th grade class and never did anymore because they weren't having to be in their class with that student anymore that they had a difficult time with. So there are pros and cons for sure, and there's also very much pros and cons for each individual child as well too.
My name's Jamie, she, her, and I'm a parent and a teacher here. And when I think about equity in this conversation, there's so much. There's like individual preference, and I have a student who sports is his life, and he would love to go to bands, I'm sure, and play all of the sports. But when I think about a small school with its own school board being able to make decisions that are best for the entire community, it's not so much about preference as about learning needs. Again, like kids being seen, meeting those kids where they are, and having the staff, the board, the community, like all of you being able to put that focus on that group of students. And that I don't know how that can happen in a larger school where we're sending out. So there's like personal preference, which I get, actually, Wayne, I get it, totally, like I'm there with you. And then there's also this question of like, how do we best serve equity? How do we best serve everyone? And I see a small school being able to really maintain that control. I don't see how we could do that as a town sending out 7th and 8th grade.
Some final thoughts as we approach 8 o'clock and are ending that.
I deeply appreciate everyone's sharing and the difficulties. And so, my name is Nelly Sarkisian, and I am a parent of a current student and a former student, and also an educator. So in terms of equity, I also think families' needs. Meeting the academic, potentially, academic needs of students at different levels, and I have deeply appreciated the multi-level educational support that the school is able to provide. But I also have witnessed, as Ty was mentioning, COVID years, that while one of my kids was struggling socially, if it was not for the I misspoke, I meant to say the teacher, but I said parent because it was almost like teacher parenting at school in a way that they held them, that made life livable. That is deeply equity-oriented kind of a holding and teaching for me that I can't expect from a big school when there are so many students and teachers are overwhelmed. I'm also thinking of other kids who are, vulnerable for instances of racism or sexual assault that are harder to tackle or address in larger schools. or families having to send and think of transportation. So these are the things that I'm thinking about and feeling deeply grateful for this school that has been able to work with a wide range of students, also older students, mentoring younger students getting used to being in community with older folks, and then projecting out.
Liz Hottie, I go by she, her pronouns. I am a para here. I was a student here. I have kids here. I moved from Brattleboro back to Marlboro as a community and the school. I graduated with a small class, and I went to Compass and graduated again with a small class. And I felt seen the whole 4 years the way, I'm spacing who was talking about it, but I felt seen as an individual who was figuring out who I was the whole time. And, but my parents were able to bring me 45 minutes to Compass and pick me up every day. And there are lots of families who won't have that option, and they will get, the option that's available and closest, and it's not fair.
All right, thank you all. Oh, yes.
I'm Ani. I've taught at the school. I've had kids at the school. I'm currently an educator at Hilltop. And I've worked in public schools. I've worked in urban schools. And what I've seen is that students who have the opportunity to be in 8th grade and the oldest in the school, even if they're complaining and they don't have the resources that they want, and they can't play the sports, and they can't be on the competitive basketball team, and speaking from experience, the way that they're able to have mastery in their community and be of service to the younger students is something that is so valuable. And when we take that opportunity away, I feel like there's some kind of important thing that is lost for those older kids. And the way that relates to equity in my mind is that, we can't actually know what's right for every person. And we can't even maybe know what's right for our own kids, but we can try and hold them as a community so that they can figure it out for themselves. I don't actually have an opinion either way. I used to really believe that we should keep our junior high. And I pulled my kid out because his needs were not being met. So that's confusing for me. And I feel bad that I did that. And the only reason I could do that is because I teach at a place where then he can go. I really think that we need to think about equity really broadly. I feel like often when we talk about equity, what we're talking about is the sort of mandated government definition of equity, and we're not talking about kids who have mental health needs, who have safety needs with regard to their gender identity, who have safety needs with regard to their racial identity, or what community they come from, or if they're an immigrant. And all of those things are incredibly real and lead to actual real harm if kids aren't in places where they're seen, heard, and held. And I'm not saying that potentially BAMS isn't that place, but if it ends up that BAMS and Compass are the two options, there are a whole lot of kids who don't fit at either place. And if we are able to support them here as a community, we're more able to see and hold them. As a teacher here, I love being able to be at the pond and see kids growing and interacting with them in the community separately from the classroom, because it allowed me to know them in a really deep way. And I still have relationships with those kids. So I think that we really need to think about equity really broadly when we're having this conversation. and continue to think beyond our own experience, our own agendas, because the world is much more than just each one of us.
Great. Thank you all for this group, for your bravery in coming up and being able to share. And thank you to all of you for showing up tonight. This is important, and it takes a lot to be here. So please walk away remembering that this is a challenge ahead of us, right? And this is something you have a lot more information now in your pool of understanding, right? We have one more meeting scheduled. It will be January 5th. Yep, January 5th. And during that, we will talk a little bit more about impacts and different brainstorming possibilities. Again, even in that meeting, we're not reaching a decision. The decision will happen in your votes that way. So this is still your individual decision, but you're bringing together that important information. So thank you all very much. I appreciate everything you've done. You can drop your cards off here unless you really want to keep a playing card souvenir of my wonderful facilitating experience. Okay. So, board member questions on your way out. Thank you all so much.